Thank you for being here and thank you for passing it on. I appreciate it when people say to me, boy, that was good or whatever, but it's not good if it stops with you. You've got to hit this, smash that. I love that way they say that. Yes. Smash that subscribe button, pass it on, make sure that others gain the benefit that you believe you have gained. And if you don't believe you gained any benefit, go ahead, scroll away, go to somebody else. You can go and watch one of the famous people. But I think that this is going to change your life if you pay attention to this lesson. That's why I am taking the the book, The Master Plan of Evangelism, and I'm doing what I call going off the campus. I'm extending beyond what Robert Coleman said in that book that he wrote in 1963. I'm going to give you some things that Coleman did not know then because they had not been studied in human psychology and sociology. And you're going to see a significant difference adding on to what Coleman said. By all means, get that book and read it, devour it, sit on it, marinate in it, turn it over and over in your mind, and it will make a difference to you so that you can, in fact, pass it on to others. Okay, here we go. I hope that, now, just do it right now. Go ahead, say, I want you to watch this YouTube channel and tell me what you think. 72 and 73 are a pair, but let's get going on it. Here we go. So I'm going to tell you that Jesus worked with very direct intentionality. What I see in ministry work today is that people take things as information, not as transformation. I am trusting that you will actually move towards transformation. Now, when we look at the disciples in the first place, we didn't see a quick and immediate transformation. I asked the question, how did Jesus start? And it's a kind of a trick question. Who did he start with? Well, in John chapter 1, we have some insight that the other synoptics don't give us. Two of the synoptics tell us about him making a direct appeal to say, follow me. But what's happening here is spiritually responsive people have responded to the ministry of John the Baptist. In this case, people have gone from fishermen. I don't know if I'm looking at the map up here. Let's see. How does that turn out to you? No, it's over here. They're over here in the Sea of Galilee, fishing around here, and they've gone, they've gone over across the Jordan, quite some distance from home. These guys are fishermen. The fish don't get caught on their own. They got to get out there and cast nets. And did they fish every day? I don't know. I know that some days they fished and caught nothing, but in any case, if you read John's gospel, you will see that John the Baptist said, look, there's the Lamb of God. He's the guy you should be following. And two people responded to him, and he invited them to start a relationship with him. One of them is unnamed, and the other is named Andrew. Now, John the Baptist took the initiative to tell Andrew and the other guy, who is almost undoubtedly John, the writer of the gospel, and they took the initiative to go and find Jesus. So Jesus didn't find them. So how many people did Jesus initiate and start with? Well, first of all, some people found him. That's important to know. Because of the endorsement, the advocacy of John the Baptist, who was famous in his day. It was Philip. It was Philip who Jesus said, you follow me. And Andrew found Andrew and John. We don't have John doing anything here, but we know from the later Gospels that he got his brother engaged. So we got Andrew finding Peter, and Andrew comes to Jesus because John the Baptist says he should. And then we've got Jesus finding Philip and saying, follow me. That's the one. So there's the answer to the trick question. And then he goes and finds Nathanael. It's important to understand, if you're saying, but he followed me, it just takes one to follow you. And if you have the endorsement of others, which is always extremely powerful and also much rarer than it should be, because people say, no, me. I want the attention. I'm not going to give my attention over to the other guy because he might follow him more than follow me. So there's an ego thing involved there. That is difficult, and it's very real in people who are working in ministry. But it just takes one. Now, you might have to go and find that one and say to your Philip, you, buddy, come on, follow me. And you pick him. I don't know why Jesus picked him. It's not clear. But it is clear that he took the initiative to say, this isn't something for me to consume. Thus the subscribe button. Thus the pass it on. Don't you get it? I hope that you get it. If this is of value, if you're going to follow Jesus and be like Jesus, you're going to be like Philip, who goes and finds Nathanael. Jesus found Philip, and Philip found Nathanael. Now, Jesus, do you read the passage from John chapter 1? Jesus had said, I had you figured out before, to Nathanael, who said, whoa, that's amazing. In my paraphrase, of course. But in that John chapter 1, you have the genesis of this tremendous movement. It's really important that you understand that Jesus worked intentionally. He was there where the John the Baptist movement crowd was. He was there when John the Baptist, who recognized who he was, said, that's the one you should be following. And some people took some initiative to go to Jesus, but Jesus also took initiative to invite people to come to him. One more you need to know. If you're going to be like Jesus and you're not prepared to take good things and pass them on to others and advocate for others and say, you should read this book, you should watch that video, I'd like to get together with you and so and have coffee with him. If you're not going to take initiative, you are not following Jesus. Can it be any more straightforward than that? You might think you are, but if you're just a sponge absorbing it all for yourself and not prepared to lead others, you just didn't get it in the first place, and it's time for you to repent. See, I get to say these things because you're not in the room and you can't yell at me. And if you're yelling at the screen, go ahead, punch your computer screen and see how that works out for you. Okay, today we're going off the campus. I'm drilling down deeper than Coleman did, but following up very much on what Coleman says, in that Jesus was prepared not to say, no, get them to come and see me, but he was prepared to delegate and send people out on his own. Now, last week, we looked at Jesus sending out the 12. This week, we're going to drill down on the 70 or 72. My guess is it's 72. There's a 50-50 textual variant there. And I think they picked up the 70 because that made sense in tying in with some old numbers. But it doesn't matter. It's just a textual variant that's a very small import. I'm going with 72. So I won't say 70 or 72, but you can pick 70 if you like. I'm not going to. There's no battleground on that ground as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so we had Jesus send out 12. Now we're going to look at some of the principles that flow from the other passage only recorded by Luke, where he sends out more. Now, he had a strategy. Jesus built outward in concentric circles with deliberate stages, and the core team came before the wider circle. Now, it's really important that you stay with me on this, because I think you'll get a glimmer of light as to how this was working. And I think it's well worth following now. This is described for us in Luke, in particular, this particular passage that we're kind of, camping on today. And I'm trusting that you will go and read it yourself. I believe that what Jesus was doing here was very, very deliberate in picking a pattern to follow. And as I say, Luke was the historically oriented guy who didn't pick up things. John had picked up what we talked about earlier from John chapter 1, and now this is what Luke picks up. Now, I got to leave that for a second and could just pretend I'm opening up another window. If I was smart, I'd put a different background on it, I suppose. Back in the 1990s, Robin Dunbar an anthropologist, did some studies about how people group themselves together. And he didn't intend it this way, but there's a thing called Dunbar's number. And basically what that says is the human brain, plus or minus, is capable of maintaining 150 stable relationships. You can have a much larger group of acquaintances where you know names, but to have any kind of a relationship, and it's divided up amongst your friends, your neighbors, the associates you may work with or play with. And I will add in, what did I say? Friends, neighbors, relatives, neighbors, associates, neighbors, and church I'll add in there. What Dunbar said, and this is very important we understand, because it certainly runs parallel to what Jesus did. The inner layers nest inside each other. We go from 5, Dunbar's number, not Jesus. Jesus' number was apparently 3, who are really close to him. Dunbar said 15, that group that you trust the most that are out there. Jesus picked 12. And then the 50 that are well known to you. It's really quite interesting. And I think the parallel here is that the 72 are parallel to the 50. And once you get past the 150, you're just beyond really active relationships. You might say, oh, I know him, but no, you don't know well. I think it all rhymes with Jesus. And I think it's very important that we understand what can happen at what level. So in prior to that, the original selection that we might call stage 0, he assembles this group, he calls them, Mark chapter 3, and then he sends them out. They're given the authority and mission by Jesus to go and do what he wants them to do. And some will say, well, that's got to do with the 12 tribes of Israel. Maybe I'm not fighting that. But what Jesus is saying when he sends them out, you want to focus on the lost sheep of Israel. That's what the 12 are sent out to do. It was his prototype, the beginning. It wasn't the final place. Remember, I started by saying he worked strategically. And then stage 2, which is only recorded by Luke, as I mentioned, he has 72 others. The 12 are not included in the 72. So it isn't 60 plus 12. It is, I can't do the math, 72 plus 12. And some will say that, well, there's the echo of the Old Testament stuff, and perhaps they said, perhaps it was 20, but perhaps it got messed up in the transmission over the years. No. The pattern was that we went from the one group that were sent out quite deliberately, commissioned to do action, not to be on a committee to decide things, but to be in a team to do things. He sent them out, and then he moves on to the wider circle. But he gives the same basic instructions to the 12 and to the 72. Isn't that interesting? They're to proclaim the kingdom, heal the sick, and they're supposed to travel light. Very important for us to understand that ministry is supposed to involve traveling light. I had pastor friends who'd say, well, I can't come and pastor your church unless you can pay me X dollars. That's not the first piece of the discussion. Obviously, you have to live somehow. But it is a matter of this business that you're supposed to expect. If you're going to follow Jesus and do what he wants you to do, you're going to have to travel light. You are not going to have the greatest retirement plan in history. Maybe you'll have a retirement fund, maybe you won't. But you will not emphasize that. You will not focus on that. You will focus on the mission. And Jesus gives the same thing to the 12, essentially, as he gives to the 72, except with the 72, he doesn't put the restriction of the people of the house of Israel. And also interesting, he says when he sends out the 72, you're going to go to the places where Jesus was going to fall off and go to the villages. Don't stop and talk to people along the way. How that fits in with your view of evangelism. but get to the target area and work there. It's very important that it was quite intentional with very deliberate instructions. I've covered before in some other materials that Jesus wasn't script-oriented. The only real script that we have in the New Testament from Jesus is this prayer sample that he gave us to pray. And I think that we damage our possibilities when we lean too heavily on scripts. I'm not against scripts. I've used them. I know that they really matter. It creates teamwork if everybody's kind of like using the same words, and that in itself creates power. But you can't lean on the script as if the script is going to matter. You got to lean on the power in the message and the power in the human personality of the individual who has been transformed to generate that message on an outgoing basis. Now, everybody knows in their own head they're not perfect. And so they say, oh, I can't be the example. I'm sorry, folks, you're the only example that he's got. It's your feet, it's your hands, it's your mouth, it's your face. It's your intentionality that makes a difference. So how long is it between sending out of the 12 and the sending out of the 72? We don't know. But I want to say it's months. So what's going on in the meantime with these months? I think that wider circle develops because of the evidence of the smaller circle. And then ultimately we get to the ultimate circle without geographical limit, in no symbolism here. It's just all of humanity. It's the whole world. Everyone, everywhere. That's where we're supposed to take it to. Now, we know, practically speaking, that not everyone is going to respond. Historically speaking, not everyone responds positively. That should be our normal understanding that not everybody is going to. But when Jesus picked people, right at that John chapter 1 passage, Andrew comes and says, Peter, you got to get in on this. Philip, Jesus says, follow me. And he says, Nathaniel, this is the thing. Now, John, probably self-effacingly, as he writes the story, doesn't say, and I went home and got my big brother, or my other brother, my brother. Jesus picks people who are willing to pass it on. That's why I believe it's very important, if this is of value to you, that you pass it on. I'm also, not so naive as to believe that everybody who sees this is actually going to do it. You're just going to feel guilty about not doing it, so it's going to pile on. I'm sorry. I can't alleviate your guilt. What's the worst thing that can happen if you actually say to somebody, I think you should watch this YouTube channel, and they don't? Well, I'm going to tell you right now that most won't. So you don't pass it on to one, you pass it on to many. And perhaps one or more will pick it up, and perhaps that one or more will start a movement going forward. There's a TED Talk video, one of the most watched TED Talks of a guy by the name of Derek Sivers, S-I-V-E-R-S, I think, D-E-R-E-K, I believe that's the way he spells it. Go to TED Talks, search YouTube, Derek Sivers, TED Talk, and you will see how he talks about starting a movement. Now, he does it using an illustration on a video, and it's kind of fun. It's a very short video, works very well. The principles that he uncovered there, I've done some research on them, and they are well validated. What he says in there, and he doesn't validate them, but they're well validated by history and by sociology as how you build a movement. It starts with one, and you've got to be able to put yourself out there and make an idiot of yourself in the eyes of some. But then if one guy follows, then maybe others will follow, and maybe there will be a group. Yeah, go watch it. It's worth doing. This is the process that started with a very small group into the larger group out to 72. And I'm fascinated as to where those 72 came from. I just know that they weren't the only 72 people who were hanging on to Jesus and following him around and so on. Most of them would say, I'm too busy. I got my other things. And I just, I don't speak for you to do that. It shouldn't surprise you. You know what you do when you see somebody like that? You don't go, I tried, and it must be me because I respond. You say next. And you go and you find somebody else that you can give the opportunity to. And eventually you may find somebody. And if you don't, it doesn't really matter in the sense that you've done what you could do. All you can do is all you can do. All I can do is all I can do. I make the effort every week to put this out here. And it's not something that happens automatically, but it's something that takes some discipline. And I'm pleased to apply that because maybe, just maybe, you're the one. I hope so, but I can't even know who you are. You see my face. You know, you're so far from your computer screen, and it seems in the moment that I'm close to you, but I can't. It's a dark glass. I can't see how you're responding. I'm speaking as if you're kind of sitting across the table from me, and I'm speaking enthusiastically, kind of a notch above enthusiastic across the table to enthusiastic in a small group, and maybe in when I really get wound up, in fact, using the methodology of speaking to a large group. I don't know. I'm doing the best I can do. Will you do the best you can do and pass it on? Why did Jesus give it to the 12? Now, this is one of the things that I think is deeply insightful. And I sure hope you're still with me here. And I sure hope you pick this up and understand it. So we know that he fed 5,000, 4,000 on another occasion, plus the women and children. So it's at least 10,000 people. That's not where they were fed, but they weren't formed. Now, probably within those group were most of, maybe all of the 500 witnesses that Paul refers to in 1 Corinthians who saw Jesus after the resurrection. But it wasn't the 500 that he gave him to. The 72, well, they had the same commission, so he did give them to that. But they were deployed, but they weren't as deeply developed as what amounted to the end because we lost Judas, the 11. It was the 12 that had been with him for the ministry from beginning to end. It's about halfway through his ministry when the 72 come into the picture. There's a famous saying of yesteryear that I hope that you will look it up. Margaret Mead's famous saying. I can't quote it directly, but she says, after as an anthropologist and sociologist studying humanity, back in the 1960s, she looked at all the people movements that were out there and said, never doubt that it's a small group of citizens who can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. That's my paraphrase. It's pretty close. And I believe that that's true. And that small group would seem to indicate, if we blend together what Mead said with what Dunbar said, with what Sivers shows in his video, we see that there's something special about this small group in the range of a dozen people. Now, what is proven to be true is that social loafing is the technical term. It grows as the group size grows. When you have a large group, people think, well, isn't that interesting? And they see the lights on the stage and everything else, but they don't say, wow, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. See, my own call to ministry was really in the framework of being a youth group in a large church in its day. And I looked around the youth group and I thought, nobody's going to pick this up. Nobody's going to say it's my responsibility to move forward with this. And I and one other person, only one other that I know of, from that youth group, went off to try to train for ministry. And I loved my Bible college years, but I didn't learn all that I needed to learn. And I honestly don't know that the professors knew everything that they needed to know. I don't think they knew what I'm covering here, or they would have shared it with me. I was the one who raised my hand, and nobody came and recruited me. I anointed myself. And a lot of people thought, oh yeah, right, Carter. I think I was a bit of I wasn't a rebel, not by any means, but a bit of a let's have some fun. I was the guy who, And then when everybody got married, I was the guy who would get somebody else to tie the tin cans streaming out the back of the car when they drove off. I never did it myself, but I'd always induce somebody else to do it. I can set things up and so on. And I believe that since nobody else in our youth group was raising their hand and saying, pick me, here am I, send me, that probably I should do so. So I did so. And I don't think I've had one moment when I regretted that decision. I didn't know how far the calling would go. I didn't know how hard it would be. And if I knew then what I know now, I don't know how I'd respond. Maybe I would have backed out. I don't think I would have. I think I would have taken on the challenge and say, somebody has got to get out there and make a significant difference. In a smaller group, the smaller the group, the less social loafing there is. Yeah. And that's why I believe that in denominations and other groupings, it's really, really wise to appoint a group of about 12 for a specific task, and not just let them go off and fly on their own, but give them some accountability and oversight. I think it's a very easy thing to say, no, let's keep this tight with a small board and whatever, and then we'll make the decisions that'll get rid of all of the ambiguities. You may get rid of some ambiguities, but you also get rid of your advocates, and you really need those advocates. So I think it's very important that those meetings that gather together, you might call it a cluster or something like that, that they are not just there to kind of talk about social issues and politics and even theology, but they're there to be action-oriented, to say, okay, where do we go next? What are we doing? Where's the small town that we're going to attack? Oh, they need help over there. Okay, I'll set aside some time and leave my home base to go and support somebody else. That is the kind of decision-making that happens in a small group. It's small groups of people that make all of the difference. Around a dozen. Why does it not happen? Well, I think we treat the meeting of the 12 in that small group as being, wow, that was really encouraging to me, as if it was all about me. Not about you. I hope you're encouraged when you meet with that association of a small group of people, but no, you're there to do something. I think that what we do is we wait for somebody else. I got way too much on my plate. But that should be done. Somebody else should do it. We need the 12 level of maturity. When Jesus said, go, they said, and so they just did after they had the power of the Spirit that came upon them at the time of the, the words always escape me, Pentecost. They went and did it. And we need people like that. Now, those other people in the larger group, the 72 additional people, the 72 others, as Luke says, we don't have a whole lot of recording. Maybe a couple of them were in that 72 group in the New Testament, but we don't say, this particular person was a member of the 72 that Jesus sent out. No, and with the 12 and the 72, he paired them up because individually it was really, really tough to carry any but a message. You need somebody who'll walk through walls with you, not tell you to walk through the wall, not say, if you do this, then I'll do that. But they'll say, come on, let's go walk through the wall together. That's what's really needed. And I think that we have just not recruited properly. I think we've missed it. Something happened between the 12 and a few months, don't know how long, and the 72. It's not inspired, therefore we don't know what happened, but we know what must have happened. That the 72 who were observing Jesus also observed that the 12 going out 2 by 2 got something done. Jesus was willing to give the message away and didn't say, you go out there and invite them to come to my event. He told them to get out there and create their own events. And he also had his own personal contacting with people that to join the group. So he was not just a coach sitting behind the bench. He was the playing coach, actually out there doing it and demonstrating it. If we're going to get things right, we're going to be like Jesus. And I think that you have to say to the people who you gather together, you're the prototype, you're my people, you have to do this. Not we're going to talk about this, but I'm going to teach you how. I'm going to set the example for you. You're going to watch me, and then you're going to do what I do, and you're going to take the things that I have received, and you're going to pass them on to other people. You're going to take my stuff and pass it on the way I've done it, and you're going to fail my way first, and eventually you may figure out a better way, but at first, you've got to commit yourself to following me and passing it on to others. 2 Timothy 2:2 should be obvious. And then when they go out, and the 72 went out and they came back, then there's always a debriefing. You don't just leave it out in the wind. You always ask for the report and treat the report with deep respect and encouragement that even if it wasn't as big as possible, that it was something that was worth doing. They got a pattern to follow and be intentional like Jesus. Build and form the core. And at some point in time, I'm working on some research on this. How do you move from the core you've got? I think that your existing or ordinary normal-sized church, typical kind of the median-sized church attendance when they have brag Sundays in the 60s, that makes an ideal group. And you might only have 1, 2, or 3 right now, but that's a place to start. And encourage them to get out and talk to the other people. Yes, you may have to give them a recruiting script of what to say, or how you're going to go and talk to these people. And eventually, it will multiply outward from the core if we get it right. When we get to the final phase, we've got all the limits. We go to the last place on earth. I'm telling you, research confirms that 12 to 15 is the sweet spot of people. So try and build that towards a board, a committee, team, whatever you call it, in that range of people. If you start with 3, you start with 3. But if you can get it to that size, don't take it up to 30 or 40. That's been a mistake that some have made now. If the church says we've got a group of 40 elders, that tells me they don't have elders. They've got a group of maybe 40 or 50 yes men who are glad to be in the room and eat the donuts and drink the coffee and share the fellowship, but they don't intend to be action-oriented. Now, that's my expectation. Prove me wrong. The larger the group, the more they diffuse. They're like putting some food coloring in some water. The food coloring is strong. Let's say it's red food coloring. You drop it in a glass of water and it diffuses out. And it spreads out, and the water's barely pink by the time you get done. Larger groups do that. But if you take that small drop of food coloring and you put it in just a small little teaspoonful of water, it retains its color. And that's an illustration of how things work with people. Small groups are willing to accept a concentrated responsibility if they know the buck stops there. So I would encourage you to sit down and write out some names of who you got. If it's 1, it's 1. If it's 12, it's good for you, but not likely. But if you take an Andrew who finds a Peter, and you take a Philip who finds a Nathaniel, then the small group that you've got now, properly formed and properly encouraged and trained, and given the opportunity and the space to grow, you may say, I don't have anybody. Yeah, you do. They're just in the network beyond what you can see right now. You can trust in the Lord and assign the role of the mission, not a decision, that you want action-oriented people. And then don't just pass it on and give it away. And sometimes you're going to have to give up on people because they just don't do it eventually. Play what I learned to call checkerboard management with them. Make a move, encourage them to make their move in a particular time limit, a particular way, so that they know that whatever, by next Tuesday, they will have made this phone call that they're supposed to make or whatever. And then when you contact them on Tuesday, they say, oh, I've been sick. I've been so busy. Oh, well, I forgot. Hey, you know the library of excuses. You fire them right away. Give them several chances, but say, okay, so didn't get it done by this Tuesday. Can you get it done today? Why don't we just hang up the phone now and you make that phone call right now? I'll call you back in 10 minutes. Urgency creates itself when you properly exert encouraging authority with people. Keep your eye out to who's the next person who's hanging around the edge watching, who can get into your circle. Resist this pull of saying, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had 1,000 people? Oh, no, it won't work. The gospel has never gone forward off of the large group. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret, and I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. The great evangelism movement of the previous century started in, roughly speaking, the 1950s, where we filled stadiums with people. But the research, the best research you can do, and you can go do more research if you like and prove me wrong, is that getting from kind of, those seats in the stands to being actively engaged in a local church 1 year later, so fruit that remained, cost a lot of money per convert. When I ask people, how much do you think it costs per convert? Oh, I don't have any idea. What I know. Well, don't you think that would be important to know if we invested a particular dollar amount in getting a result that didn't get us the numbers of results we liked? Oh, yeah. Oh, look at how many people we baptized. I had this big church talk. Oh, we baptized 50 people. I'm not bragging, but we did baptize 50 people. How much money did it cost to take that person from unbeliever to believer who was ready to follow Jesus, demonstrating it with baptism? How much money did that cost you in the heat bill in the church and all of those other things? Well, I can tell you that with that major evangelistic crusade that hoped to get people in church, intended to get people in church, the best math that I've heard is $9,500 per convert. Folks, we can't win the world spending 10 grand per person on it. That means that we have to invest on the personal network that we have and work forward with that to make everything go forward, because you not only hit the subscribe button, you pass it on to somebody else. And if you're not going to pass this on, what are you going to pass on? You got to have something. And I hope that you'll pass this on, because I believe that what we've covered today, if you drill down on it and mull it over and consider it and go and study the scriptures to see if what I'm saying is consistent with the scriptures, then I believe it will make a difference. And that's my hope and my prayer for you, even knowing that most of the people in the room will not be like I was, will be kind of not like I was in that youth group. I can picture the room where we met, maybe 50 teens at the time. And some of them were quite enthusiastic, but none of them had any orientation to move on towards serving the Lord in a major ministry. Their headlights didn't go down the road that far. And I know that most people who see this, their lights won't go down the road, but you can be different. And I'm trusting that you will. And I'm trusting you'll be back next week with a friend.